The ship called Nebula Seeker moved through space with a soft hum. Inside, 7 aliens prepared for their first visit to Earth. They had studied this planet for many months. They knew about the oceans, mountains, and the strange creatures that lived there. But they knew very little about the beings called humans. Lieutenant Commander Zextari checked the landing plans one last time. He was tall and thin with skin that shimmered blue in the ship's light. His large eyes blinked slowly as he reviewed the data. "All preparations are complete," said Officer Myra. Her voice was musical, like small bells ringing. "We will land in an area humans call Montana. Our scans show no settlements nearby." Zextari nodded. "Good. We must avoid human contact on this mission. The Council wants only observation." The ship began to shake as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Red lights flashed across the control panels. "Commander!" called Eli, the youngest crew member. His green scales darkened with fear. "The atmospheric readings are wrong? Our calculations failed to account for a weather system?" First Officer Velinor moved quickly to the controls. Her long fingers danced across the screens. "The main engines are overheating. We cannot maintain landing trajectory." The ship lurched to one side. Equipment crashed to the floor. The aliens held on to whatever they could reach. "We must abort," Velinor said. "But the science team can still complete the mission. Commander, you and your team take the exploration pod. The main ship will return to orbit for repairs." Zextari looked at his 6 team members. All were scientists, not pilots or soldiers. But they had trained for this mission for years. "Agreed," he said. "How soon can you return for us?" "1 Earth day. Perhaps less." The 7 scientists rushed to the small pod at the bottom of the ship. They strapped themselves into seats as the main ship released them. The pod fell through the clouds, spinning and bouncing in the turbulent air. "Brace for impact," shouted ZX DAR. The pod crashed into a forest. It slid across the ground, knocking down small trees before coming to rest in a small clearing. Inside, the aliens checked themselves for injuries. "Is everyone alive?" asked ZX TAR. One by one, they confirmed they were unhurt. Myra looked out the small window. "The air is breathable," she said, "but our landing location is incorrect. We are at least 20 miles from our planned research area." Zextari activated the pod's communication system. Static filled the air. "The storm is interfering with our signal," said Eli. "We cannot contact the main ship." "Then we proceed with the mission until they return," said Zextari. "Let's set up a perimeter and begin our observations." The door of the pod opened with a hiss. The aliens stepped onto Earth for the first time. They felt the soft ground under their feet. They smelled the rich scents of the forest. They heard birds calling in the distance. "Fascinating," whispered Beth, the team's life scientist. She held up a device that analyzed the air. "The oxygen levels are higher than our homeworld. The plant life here is incredibly diverse." The aliens spread out around their pod. They set up small devices to monitor the environment. They collected samples of soil and plants. They recorded the sounds of the forest. None of them noticed the human watching from behind a large tree. John Miller had been living in these woods for almost 3 months. Each year, he spent time alone in the wilderness to practice his survival skills. He was a teacher who showed others how to live off the land. But in all his years in these mountains, he had never seen anything like this. John stayed hidden and watched the strange visitors. They were clearly not human. They stood about 7 feet tall with thin bodies and long limbs. Their skin seemed to change color slightly as they moved, matching the surroundings. They communicated with clicks and whistles, though sometimes he heard what sounded like words. Their ship, it could only be a spaceship, was about the size of a small bus. It was damaged but not destroyed. The aliens moved with purpose, setting up equipment around the crash site. John knew he should probably leave. He should hike back to his cabin and call someone, though who do you call when aliens land in the forest? But curiosity kept him watching. The wind began to pick up. John looked at the sky and frowned. Dark clouds were moving in from the northwest. He recognized the signs of a severe storm approaching. The temperature was already dropping. In a few hours, it would be dangerously cold. Especially after the rain started. The aliens didn't seem to notice the changing weather. They continued their work, apparently unaware of the danger. John observed their thin bodies and lack of protective clothing. They would not survive a Montana mountain storm without shelter. As he watched, the aliens began to move differently. Their movements became less smooth. They wrapped their long arms around themselves. Even from a distance, John could see they were shivering. One of them, perhaps their leader, looked at a small device that projected an image in the air. The alien seemed worried. It spoke to the others, and they gathered closer to their ship. The first drops of cold rain began to fall. The wind gusted through the trees. The temperature continued to drop. The aliens huddled together near their damaged ship. They tried to get back inside, but something was wrong with the door. It wouldn't close properly. The rain began to fall harder, driven by the wind. The aliens' shivering became more violent. John Miller made a decision. These beings were in trouble. They had advanced technology, but they were not prepared for Earth's weather. Without help, they might not survive the night. He stepped out from behind the tree and began walking toward the aliens. He moved slowly, his empty hands visible. The aliens saw him immediately. Several of them raised devices that might have been weapons. John stopped. He held his hands higher and called out, "I mean no harm. A storm is coming. You need shelter." The aliens made rapid sounds to each other. One stepped forward, the leader, John guessed. It held up a small device and spoke into it. After a moment, the device made a sound, and then words came out in a flat, mechanical voice. "Who are you? What do you want?" "My name is John Miller," he replied, speaking clearly. "I live in these mountains. A bad storm is coming, very cold, very wet. You need shelter or you will be in danger." The alien spoke again, and the device translated. "Our ship will return soon. We do not need help." A strong gust of wind blew through the clearing. The rain turned to sleet, stinging John's face. The aliens shuddered from the cold. "Your ship won't fly in this storm," John said. "It might be hours before it can land safely. You need shelter now." The alien leader seemed to consider this. It spoke with the others. Their shivering was getting worse. Finally, the leader turned. Back to John. "How can you help us?" "We have no tools to build shelter," John smiled. "I don't need tools. I can show you how to build a shelter using just what's in the forest. But we need to start now." The alien studied John for a long moment. Then it nodded. "Show us." The storm grew stronger around them. Time was running out. The rain fell harder now. Cold wind whipped through the trees. The aliens followed John deeper into the forest, their bodies trembling from the cold. They moved awkwardly on the uneven ground, so different from the smooth floors of their ship. "We must stay close to our vessel," said Zextari through the translation device. His voice sounded worried. "We need trees and shelter materials," John explained. "Don't worry. We won't go far." John led them to an area where several fallen trees created a natural windbreak. The ground sloped slightly, which would help keep water from pooling beneath them. He looked up at the tall pines surrounding them. "This is a good spot," he said. "We can build here." The aliens watched as John began to gather long, straight branches from the ground. He collected some that were as thick as his arm and others that were thin and bendable. When he had a good pile, he turned to the aliens. "I need your help," he said. "We need more branches like these, and large pieces of tree bark, and pine needles, lots of them." The aliens looked at each other. Myra stepped forward. "Show us what to look for," she said. John demonstrated how to find good branches and how to pull bark from fallen trees. He showed them how to gather handfuls of dry pine needles from under the thicker trees where rain hadn't soaked them yet. The aliens spread out to search. They moved carefully, copying what John had shown them. Their long fingers worked well for peeling bark, though they struggled with the heavier branches. Eli, the youngest alien, approached John with a handful of wet leaves. "Are these useful?" he asked. John shook his head. "We need dry materials." "Look." under big trees where rain doesn't reach the ground. As the aliens gathered supplies, John began building. He took two of the thickest branches and drove them into the ground at an angle, forming a V shape. He used a rock to pound them firmly into place. "What are you making?" asked Beth, watching closely. "A frame," John said, "for a lean-to shelter. It's simple, but will keep us dry and block the wind." He placed a long, strong branch across the top of the V to create a ridgepole. Then he began adding more branches, leaning them against the ridge, to form the walls and roof of the shelter. "Your species builds without tools?" asked Zextari. He seemed amazed. "We use tools when we have them," John explained. "But humans learned to build shelters long before we had metal tools. Our ancestors used stone, bone, and wood to make what they needed. The aliens brought more materials. John showed them how to weave smaller branches together to strengthen the frame. They worked quickly as the storm grew stronger. "Now for the roof and walls," John said. He showed them how to layer the bark pieces, overlapping them like shingles to keep rain out. "Like scales?" said Eli, touching his own skin. "Yes, exactly like scales," John smiled. They covered the shelter with bark, starting from the bottom and working up. John showed them how to secure each piece with small branches pushed through and around the frame. "Now we add pine needles on top," John explained. "They help shed water and add insulation for warmth." The aliens spread thick layers of pine needles over the bark. Their thin fingers worked quickly, and soon the shelter was covered. "What about the front?" asked Myra, pointing to the open side of the lean-to. "We'll leave part open," John said. "But we'll build a small fire there to keep us warm." The aliens looked at each other with concern. "Fire?" asked Zextari. "Is that safe?" "With proper care, yes," John said. "We'll need it to survive the night." John gathered stones to make a small ring in front of the shelter. He explained how the rocks would contain the fire and reflect heat into their shelter. "Now we need dry wood for burning," he said. This was the hardest part in the rain. John showed them how to look for standing dead trees and break off lower branches that weren't yet soaked. He showed them how to check if wood was dry enough by breaking it to check the inside. While they gathered firewood, John prepared a fire starter. He found a piece of dry cedar bark and rolled it between his hands until it became fluffy tinder. He gathered small twigs and arranged them in a small teepee shape. The aliens watched in fascination as John took two special rocks from his pocket. "Flint and pyrite," he explained. "I always carry these." He struck the rocks together near the tinder, sparks flew, and after several attempts, the tinder caught fire. John carefully added tiny twigs, then larger ones. He blew gently on the flames, coaxing them to grow. The aliens moved closer, drawn to the warmth. "Amazing," whispered Beth. "Creating heat without technology." "This is very old technology," John corrected with a smile. "Just not electronic." As the fire grew stronger, John added larger pieces of wood. The flames cast dancing shadows inside their shelter. The heat pushed back against the cold air. "Let's get inside," John said. "Bring the extra wood with us." The shelter was big enough for all 8 of them, though the aliens had to crouch low. John showed them how to sit with their feet toward the fire for maximum warmth. The ground inside was covered with a thick layer of dry pine needles that provided insulation from the cold earth. "On my world, we would die without our technology," said Zextari. His shivering had lessened in the warmth of the fire. "If our environmental systems failed, we would have no way to survive. Humans have been surviving in the wild for thousands of years," John said. "Long before we had computers or machines." "How did you learn these skills?" asked Myra. "My father taught me, and his father taught him," John explained. "I teach others now." Many humans have lost these skills, but some of us keep the knowledge alive. The storm raged outside, but inside the lean-to, they were dry and growing warmer. The sound of rain hitting their shelter was steady, but no drops came through. Wind occasionally gusted against the walls, but the structure held firm. "Your knowledge is valuable," said Zextari. "Perhaps more valuable than our advanced science in this situation." John added more wood to the fire. Different kinds of knowledge for different situations. Your ships can travel between stars. That's pretty impressive to me. The aliens relaxed as the heat from the fire warmed their bodies. They watched the flames with wonder, as if seeing fire for the first time. "Will your ship return soon?" John asked. "When the storm passes," Zextari replied. "They cannot land in these conditions." "Then we have time," John said. "Time for you to tell me about your world, and time for me to show you more about mine." Outside, the rain turned to sleet, then snow. But inside the simple shelter, human and aliens found unexpected warmth and the beginning of understanding. The fire crackled as John added another piece of wood. The night had grown colder, but inside their shelter, the small group stayed warm. The aliens had stopped shivering and now watched the dancing flames with curious eyes. "Are you hungry?" John asked, reaching into his backpack. The aliens looked at each other. Zextari spoke through the translator. "We have nutrient supplements in our emergency kits, but they were damaged in the crash." John pulled out a small cloth bag. "I have enough to share." "It's not much, but it will help." He opened the bag and took out strips of dried meat, some nuts, and dried berries. He offered them to the aliens. "This is jerky," he explained, holding up a strip of the dried meat. "Preserved meat. Very high in protein, and these are walnuts and dried blueberries." The aliens examined the food with caution. Beth used a small device to scan the offerings. "The composition is compatible with our biology," she said, sounding surprised. "No toxic elements detected." Eli was the first to try the food. He took a small bite of jerky and chewed slowly. His eyes widened. "The flavor is ... intense," he said. "Different from our processed nutrition." Soon all the aliens were trying the simple food. They seemed fascinated by the varied textures and flavors. John watched with amusement as they discovered the sweetness of the berries and the rich taste of the walnuts. "How do you preserve this meat without technology?" asked Myra. "Salt, smoke, and time," John replied. "Humans have preserved food this way for thousands of years. It lets us store food for long periods without refrigeration." "On our world, all food is produced in synthesis chambers," said Zextari. "Many of our people have never seen a living plant or animal used for food." "That sounds convenient," John said. "But there's something special about food you've gathered or hunted yourself." The storm continued outside, wind howling through the trees, but the shelter held strong against the elements. Inside, the small fire cast a warm glow on their faces. "Tell me about your world," John said. "What is it like?" The aliens took turns speaking. They described a planet with 3 moons and towering cities that reached into the clouds. They told of oceans filled with creatures that glowed in the dark and floating gardens that drifted with the wind currents. "Our civilization is very old," explained Zextari. "We developed space travel thousands of years ago. We have visited many worlds, but few with intelligent life like Earth." "And what do you think of Earth so far?" John asked with a smile. "It is ... challenging," said Beth. "More variable than we expected. Your weather patterns are difficult to predict." "Your species is most interesting," added Myra. "Our studies suggested humans were dependent on technology and artificial environments. Yet you demonstrate remarkable adaptation without tools." John poked the fire with a stick. "Some humans are very dependent on technology. Many wouldn't know how to survive out here. But others keep the old ways alive. Why do you choose to live this way?" asked Eli, "when you could live in comfort?" John thought for a moment before answering. "I don't always live this way. I have a home with electricity and running water. I use computers and drive a car, but I come out here to remember what's important. To test myself against nature. To feel connected to the earth in a way that's hard to explain." The aliens listened carefully, seeming to consider his words. "In our society," said Zextari, "we have lost much of our ancient knowledge. For many generations, we have relied on machines to provide for all our needs. Few of us know how to create anything with our hands anymore. Is that why you're studying Earth? John asked. Partly, admitted Zextari. Our Council of Elders fears we have become too dependent on our technology. If it were to fail, our people would struggle to survive. We came to study how other intelligent species live with and without technology. The conversation paused as John rearranged the fire. The aliens watched his hands as he carefully placed each piece of wood. Could you teach us more? Asked Myra, while we wait for our ship. John nodded. What would you like to learn? How to find food, said Eli quickly, and water. How to make tools from natural materials, added Beth. How to navigate without devices, said ZEX single quotes, TARI. John laughed. That's a lot to learn in one night, but we can start with the basics. He reached outside the shelter and picked up a straight branch about 2 feet long. Using a sharp stone, he began to strip away the bark. His fingers moved with practiced skill. This will be a simple digging stick, he explained. One of the oldest tools humans ever made. Good for finding roots, digging holes, and even self-defense in a pinch. The aliens watched closely as he worked the wood. When he finished, he handed the stick to Eli. Now you try, he said, offering another branch to Myra. The aliens were clumsy at first. Their long fingers were better suited to operating complex machinery than working with rough natural materials. But they learned quickly. Soon each alien had created a simple tool. Tomorrow, if you're still here, I can show you how to find water and identify edible plants, John said. Our ship may not return until the storm clears completely, said Zextari. We would welcome your instruction. As the night deepened, they took turns watching the fire. The aliens asked endless questions about Earth, about humans, and about John's life. He answered as best he could, sometimes laughing at their confusion over concepts like vacation or hobby. In return, they told him about their explorations of other worlds and the vast alliance of intelligent species they had formed with other spacefaring civilizations. And where does Earth fit in your alliance? John asked. Earth is classified as a developing world, explained Zextari. Not yet ready for official contact. That is why we must remain hidden. Our meeting is ... unplanned. So I'm not supposed to know about you? John raised an eyebrow. Correct, said Zextari, but circumstances have forced this interaction. Don't worry, John said. Even if I told people, most wouldn't believe me, and I'm good at keeping secrets. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. Outside, the storm was beginning to ease. The wind no longer howled, though snow still fell gently. Rest now, John said. Tomorrow we'll see if your ship returns. If not, we'll continue your education in human survival skills. The aliens settled onto the bed of pine needles. Their bodies needed less sleep than humans, but the stress of the crash and the cold had tired them. One by one, they drifted into a state of rest. Their breathing becoming slow and regular, John remained awake, watching the dying fire and the strange visitors from beyond the stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, they were safe and warm in a shelter built by human hands. Morning came with pale light filtering through the trees. The storm had passed during the night, leaving a blanket of fresh snow on the ground. John woke first and quietly added wood to the fire. The small flames grew, pushing back the morning. Chill, the aliens stirred one by one. They seemed surprised to see the white covering outside their shelter. What is this? Asked Eli, pointing to the snow. Frozen water, John explained. We call it snow. It falls instead of rain when the air is cold enough. Eli reached out and touched the white powder. He pulled his hand back quickly. It's cold! But useful, John said. He gathered some snow in his hands and placed it in a small metal cup from his pack. He set the cup near the fire. This will melt into drinking water, clean and safe. The aliens watched with interest as the snow slowly turned to water. They seemed fascinated by this simple change. Our communications are still blocked, said Zextari after checking a small device. The ship cannot locate us. The storm may have damaged your equipment, John suggested. Or maybe something in these mountains blocks your signals. We should return to our pod, said Beth. We have backup systems there. John nodded. We'll go after we eat and gather some supplies. He showed the aliens how to prepare a simple breakfast from his remaining food. He mixed dried oats with water and added dried fruit. The aliens tried the porridge cautiously but seemed to enjoy its warmth and sweet taste. Today I'll teach you how to find food in the forest, John said. Even in winter, there are things to eat if you know where to look. They packed up their few belongings and covered the fire with snow. John showed them how to mark trees so they could find their way back to the shelter if needed. The walk back to the crashed pod was slow. The snow made the ground slippery, and the aliens struggled with the uneven terrain. John pointed out useful plants along the way. These pine trees provide more than shelter, he explained. The inner bark is edible in emergencies. The needles can be made into tea, which is rich in vitamin C. He showed them how to identify various tracks in the snow deer, rabbit, fox, and squirrel. The aliens took pictures with their devices and asked endless questions when they reached the pod. They found it partially buried in snow. The aliens rushed to check their equipment. The main power cells are drained, reported Myra, and the backup system is damaged. Can you fix it? John asked. The aliens conferred among themselves, clicking and whistling in their own language. We can restore basic functions, Zextari finally said. But not enough to send a strong signal to our ship. What if we move to higher ground? John suggested. Up on that ridge, there would be less interference. Zextari considered this. Yes, that could work, but we cannot move the entire pod. Just take what you need, John said. We can build another shelter up there. The aliens gathered essential equipment from the pod. They packed communication devices, scientific instruments, and what remained of their supplies. Each carried a share of the load as they followed John up the slope toward the ridge. The climb was harder than the morning walk. The ridge rose steeply above the forest, and the snow grew deeper as they ascended. The aliens struggled with the effort, their breathing becoming rapid. Your world has much stronger gravity than ours, explained Beth between breaths. And your atmosphere is denser. Take it slow, John advised. Small steps. Use your digging sticks for balance. By midday, they reached a flat area just below the ridge top. John surveyed the spot and nodded with approval. This is good. Protected from wind, but with a clear view of the sky, we'll build here. Another shelter? Asked Eli, looking tired. A different kind, John said. More like a small house than last night's lean-to. It will take more work, but it will be stronger. He showed them how to clear away snow to find the ground beneath. Together they gathered more branches, bark, and pine needles. This time, John created a circular frame using flexible saplings bent and tied together at the top. This is called a wickiup, he explained. Many Native American tribes built shelters like this. Simple, but effective. The aliens worked more confidently now, having learned from building the previous shelter. They wove branches together to create walls and added layers of bark for waterproofing. Your species has adapted to many environments, observed Zextari, without changing your physical form. Humans can't change our bodies easily, John agreed, so we use our minds instead. We create what we need to survive. By late afternoon, the new shelter was complete. It was larger than the lean-to, with enough space for all of them to sit comfortably. John showed them how to make a fire pit in the center with stones and how to create a smoke hole at the top. Now for your communication device, he said. The aliens set up their equipment near the shelter. They aligned dishes toward the sky and activated power cells. The signal is stronger here, said Myra, checking readings, but still not strong enough to reach orbit. What if we boost it somehow? John asked. The aliens looked at him with surprise. Do you understand communication technology? Asked Zextari. John laughed. Not your level of technology, but I know some basics. Radio signals can be boosted with the right materials. He thought for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. My compass has a small piece of metal we could use, and maybe parts from my flashlight. The aliens watched with growing interest as John disassembled his few tools. He worked carefully, explaining what he was doing as he went. "I'm not sure this will work with your technology," he admitted, "but it's worth trying." Beth scanned the parts John had provided. "These conductors might be compatible. We can adjust our equipment to match." For the next hour, aliens and human worked together. John's practical knowledge combined with the aliens' advanced understanding. They created a makeshift signal booster using parts from both worlds. As the sun began to set, they activated the modified communication device. Lights flickered across its surface. "Signal strength increased by 40%, reported Myra with excitement. "It might be enough." They sent a message into space, hoping the ship would hear their call. Then they waited, watching the darkening sky through the trees. "It could take time for them to respond," said Zextari. "Let us prepare for another night on Earth." John nodded and began gathering more firewood. Inside their new shelter, he started a fire and showed the aliens how to arrange sleeping places around it for maximum warmth. As darkness fell, they sat around the fire and shared the last of John's food. The mood was hopeful but uncertain. "What will you tell your leaders about Earth?" John asked. "About humans?" Zextari was quiet for a moment before answering. "I will tell them that we underestimated your species, that humans possess knowledge and skills we have lost, that there is wisdom in your ways that our technology cannot replace." "And will they listen?" asked John. "Some will," said Myra. "Others will not understand until they see for themselves." Sudden beeping sound came from outside. They rushed to the communication device. Lights flashed across its surface. "They've received our signal," Eli said excitedly. "The ship is coming." The night sky was clear and filled with stars. John and the aliens stood outside their shelter, watching and waiting. Their breath made small clouds in the cold air. The communication device continued to beep softly, showing that contact with the ship had been maintained. "How long until they arrive?" John asked. "Not long," said Zextari. "They are calculating the safest landing position now." John looked around at the small group of aliens. In just one day they had changed. They stood straighter, moved more confidently on the uneven ground. Their eyes were more alert, taking in everything around them. "You learn quickly," he said. "We must adapt to survive," replied Myra, "as humans do." A bright light appeared in the sky. It moved slowly, growing larger as it descended. The aliens became excited, pointing and speaking rapidly in their own language. "They have found us," said Zextari. "They will land in the clearing below." The ship was much larger than the pod. It glowed with soft blue light as it settled into the clearing near where the pod had crashed. Snow melted around it from the heat of its engines. When it touched down, the forest became quiet again. "We should go meet them," said Zextari. "Will you come with us, John Miller?" John nodded. Together they walked down the slope toward the waiting ship. The aliens moved carefully but confidently through the snow, using their digging sticks for support just as John had taught them. As they approached the ship, a door opened in its side. A ramp extended to the ground. 2 new aliens appeared. They were dressed in fitted uniforms with many small devices attached. They looked surprised to see John. "Commander Zextari," said one of the newcomers, "your team is safe. But you have made contact with a local." "This is John Miller," Zextari explained. "He saved our lives during the storm. Without his knowledge, we would not have survived." The newcomers looked at John with interest. One of them held up a device that John guessed was some kind of scanner. "I mean no harm," John said calmly. "I only wanted to help," the device translated his words. The newcomers looked at each other, then back at Zextari. "Captain," said Zextari, "this human has shown us much about his world. About survival without technology. I request permission to bring him aboard for proper thanks before we depart." The captain considered this request. Finally, she nodded. "Granted, but briefly. We must return to orbit soon." John followed the aliens up the ramp into their ship. Inside, it was warm and filled with soft light. The walls seemed to glow from within. There were no sharp edges anywhere, everything curved smoothly from one surface to another. The captain led them to a large room, with a round table in the center. The surface of the table came alive with images and symbols when they approached. "Our ship was damaged during the storm," the captain explained to John. "We had to retreat to orbit for repairs. We could not risk further damage by attempting to land in such conditions." "I understand," John said. "It was a bad storm even by Montana standards." "Commander Zextari tells me you built shelters with only materials from the forest," the captain said, "and created fire without tools. Basic survival skills," John said modestly. "Nothing special." "For us it is very special," said the captain. "Our people have forgotten such knowledge. We rely completely on our technology." The captain touched the table surface. A new image appeared, showing a planet with 3 moons. "This is our homeworld," she explained. "Once, long ago, our ancestors lived in harmony with nature, using simple tools as your people do. But over thousands of years, we developed more and more advanced technology. Eventually, we lost touch with our natural abilities." That's happening on Earth too," John said. "Many humans never learn basic survival skills anymore. They depend on machines and computers for everything." The captain nodded. "This is why we study developing worlds like Earth, to remember what we have lost, to perhaps find a balance again." Zextari stepped forward. "Captain, I believe our mission has been more successful than we planned. Despite the difficulties, we have learned valuable lessons from John Miller." The aliens from the science team all agreed. They told the captain about building the shelters, making fire, finding food and water, and moving through the forest. They explained how John had helped them modify their communication device to reach the ship. The captain listened with interest. When they finished, she turned to John. "You have done our people a great service," she said. "Not just by saving our science team, but by sharing your knowledge." "I was happy to help," John said. "And I learned from you too, about your world and your technology. We wish to offer you something in return," said the captain. She nodded to one of her crew, who left the room and returned with a small device. "This is a communication unit," the captain explained, "modified to be compatible with Earth technology. With it, you can contact us if you wish." John took the small device. It was lightweight and felt warm in his hand. "Our leaders would be interested in learning more about human survival techniques," continued the captain. "Would you consider sharing your knowledge with us officially?" John looked surprised. "Me? I'm just a wilderness instructor. There are people with much more knowledge." "But you understand both worlds," said Zextari, "the natural and the technological. You can help us find the balance we seek." John thought about it. The idea of working with beings from another world was both exciting and frightening. But he had already crossed that line when he decided to help them during the storm. "I would be honored," he said finally, "though I'm not sure how to explain to other humans where my new students came from." The aliens smiled in their own way, their eyes crinkling at the corners. "We will arrange everything," the captain assured him. "For now, we must return to orbit before we are detected by your world's monitoring systems." The science team gathered around John. One by one, they thanked him in their own way. Eli gave him one of the digging sticks they had made together. Myra presented him with a small crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Beth recorded his voice saying, "Friendship," to add to their language database. "Until we meet again, John Miller," said Zextari, placing a long-fingered hand on John's shoulder. "Until then," John replied, "try not to crash the next time you visit." The aliens made sounds that John realized were laughter. They escorted him back to the ship's door. Outside, the night was still clear and cold. "We will contact you soon," promised the captain. John nodded and stepped off the ramp onto the snowy ground. He walked a safe distance away, then turned to watch. The ship's door closed smoothly. The blue glow around the ship grew brighter. Silently, it rose into the air, hovering for a moment before accelerating upward. In seconds, it was just another point of light among the stars, John stood alone in the clearing, holding the alien communication device and the gifts from his new friends. He looked up at the stars, thinking about the vast universe and all its possibilities. Tomorrow, he would hike back to his cabin. He would continue his life, teaching others how to survive in the wilderness. But now he had new purpose: to help bridge the gap between worlds, to remind both humans and aliens of the importance of balance between technology and natural knowledge. He turned and began walking back up the slope toward the shelter he had built. For tonight he would sleep once more beneath a roof made by human hands, dreaming of stars and new friends from a world with 3 moons.